this is Niswander, and welcome to the Nowman Show. I am here today with Dr. Lisabeth Ryder, George Callis, and also Eric Boyd. Dr. Lisabeth Ryder has been a mechanic and a small business owner, a university teacher, an anthropologist, and database analyst and computer programmer. She has also been a lifelong social justice, environmental, and human rights activist, and has been involved in both community and political organizing. She has worked for organized labor over 2 decades, having worked with both SEIU and AFS-CME. She has been involved in cooperatives since the early 1970s and co-chairs the Union Co-op Council for the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. Plus, she's the organizer for LUCI, the Los Angeles Union Cooperative Initiative. She is a graduate of the University of California, Los Angeles. Professor George Callis teaches political science, history, and government at the Miramar Community College in San Diego. He's also the political research consultant and executive producer of financial-related productions of the WSDE, Worker Self-Directed Enterprise, Arete Media Productions, and is the lead for Democracy at Work San Diego. Eric Boyd is a lifelong athlete and a coach, competing and coaching currently in CrossFit and weightlifting. He is also a co-owner of Interactive Fitness Systems, a local gym that is working towards becoming a worker cooperative and is working to form another co-op, the Platform Co-op Investment Club, an international investment club looking to help platform startups which wish to incorporate cooperative principles. He's also the co-lead for Democracy at Work Pasadena. Before we get started into this discussion, we are going to talk about, as you can probably guess from the introduction, worker cooperatives, or more specifically, worker self-directed enterprises. Let's watch a video with Professor Richard Wolff.
This is Richard Wolff with another Econo-Minute. I want to talk to you briefly about economics, democracy, and the way we do business. I want to make a simple point. If you believe in democracy, as I suspect most of us do, then you know it means basically that if you are affected by a decision, you have the right to participate in it. You know, that's the idea about our political system. Since we are affected by the decisions made by mayors and senators and governors and presidents, well, we participate in their decisions by having the authority to hire and fire them, to vote for them, or to vote against them. At least we have some participation in the decisions. But it is not that way in capitalist enterprises. In those, here's the typical story. A tiny group of people at the top, the owner, the management that the owner chooses, or in a modern corporation, the major shareholders, usually a dozen or so institutions or people who decide who is on the board of directors. That's usually 15 or 20 people, and they make all the key decisions. They decide what to produce, how and where, and what to do with the products of the labor of all the people. And what about all the people who work in an enterprise? They have no participation at all. They are excluded from deciding what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the profits and the net revenue. That's not a democratic system. But there is a democratic way of organizing an economy, and it's not capitalism. It's called worker cooperatives, and it's an old idea whose time has come. Here's how it works. All the people who work in an enterprise, all of them, one person, one vote. They make the decisions democratically. What to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the profits that, after all, they've all helped to produce. It would change our economic system. It would democratize not just the enterprises, but the system as a whole. It's long overdue. It's what democracy means when you bring it to the economy, which we should have done long ago. This is Richard Wolff for Econo-Minute.
All right. Workers' self-directed enterprise. That is a business that's owned, as you saw in the video there, owned and run by all the workers. Then that means basically one person has one vote. And if you choose to have stocks, then you also have one stock per vote, right? That's not necessarily what you find in corporate environments, believe me, I know. So there's also no external investors or managers. Everything is done. The most important decisions, particularly, if not all of them, are made by everybody within the organization. You can hire and fire who you want. You decide again democratically. What happens with the surpluses and the losses, again, democratically. So you decide whether or not to keep operations in the community. And it's always people before profits, which Professor Wolff has talked about extensively. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the different types of cooperatives, here with the team. And we want to make sure everybody's aware. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, we want to discuss that. There's a lot to talk about. And starting off with just the basic idea of worker cooperatives, as you've already learned, hopefully, one person, one vote, democratic decision making in business, and everybody owns the business. Now, there are different types, and the reason why Professor Wolff talks about worker self-directed enterprises is to distinguish those from the different types of cooperatives, because when they're worker directed, that means we make the decisions in the workplace where we work. Okay, so there's other types like housing co-op. Like there's an example, correct, Lisabeth, here in LA?
LA Eco Village. It's,
yes.
They do a land trust, and all of it is owned, by everybody that lives there. And they have meetings, and they decide democratically all the decisions that have to be made to run their housing cooperative. LA Eco Village. And if you live in the local area, you should definitely try to visit it. They do, on Sundays, they do tours. It's quite an operation.
And I think you have to make reservations ahead of time.
Yes, you do.
To
Go to the
there
website.
With Lois.
Lois Arkin.
Yeah.
She's my idol.
Yeah, I know
I want to be
Lois.
Lois Arkin when I grow up.
Yeah.
I think projects like that are so important right now, especially when we have speculation on rental properties at an all-time high,
Yes.
especially
Right.
from foreign entities buying up rental
Right.
properties.
Yes.
And so from what I understand, those are typically less expensive than their, I guess you could say, capitalist counterparts.
Well, yes, living in a housing cooperative, yes, you're working together to have ownership.
Yeah.
And this is a true danger in our society right now, the fact that we're losing ownership of our land
Yeah.
and our
Yes.
economy. We've lost ownership of our economy. And now,
long
as you
ago.
said, so many speculators coming from overseas and buying up the housing, in Los Angeles, it's a real concern. There's a housing crisis in Los Angeles.
There is.
And people are speculating and buying up the land, and soon we will not own our own housing.
That's right. That's right. Well, a lot of capitalism basically have moved overseas. So while China's economy is, I guess, relatively stable or something like that, so when you have people coming here buying up the property, there's a lot of
Right.
Chinese investors coming into Southern California and all over the place now. Just like in Hawaii, when the Japanese started buying up stuff there, during their economic boom, and you see a lot of Japanese people in Hawaii. Well, that's how that happened.
Well, it goes deeper into income inequality, because the average income in Los Angeles is $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
The average price of a house is $400,000. You
Yeah.
cannot qualify. The average wage earner cannot qualify to buy the average house.
Now, wouldn't that average, because that's a whole other topic we can get into, but isn't that average? I always thought I hear that like $50,000 is the average. Isn't that like if you count
Household.
all the multi-millionaires included in that mix? Because if you
it's
cut out
household
the
income also, which means you're counting that's multiple incomes. That's two
Yeah.
parents both
Yeah.
holding sometimes two jobs
Yeah.
to support themselves and their children.
But if you were to cut out
So-
the multimillionaires, let's say, and the millionaires here in the LA area, I think that figure would go down
Yeah.
drastically in an average, personally. I think.
So essentially, it's a privatization of housing as
Yeah,
opposed to
yeah.
bringing people together into ownership.
Right.
So that would be essentially part of the neoliberal project, where you privatize the public domain and housing, health, and so
Yeah.
forth. So all these things are tied together.
Exactly, exactly. Consumer cooperatives are owned and controlled by people who buy goods and services. Here in North Pasadena, there was a food co-op store. It's no longer open, sadly. It was a nice little place, but you had to be a member to go in there and buy the food, the organic food that came from more local growers. There's also REI, which is a recreational company. Now there's producer, agricultural, and marketing cooperatives, and I know, Elizabeth, you kind of put the in the agricultural and the marketing together. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Well, you take an organization like Sunkist. There's, I believe it's 49 producers. They each own their own farm, but they come together under the name of Sunkist to market their product. So yes, they are producing agricultural produce, but they come together as a cooperative to market their product.
So the California cheese companies like that too? Or
Yeah,
the
it's
companies?
marketing.
Yeah.
Cooperative. And the other types of cooperatives, there's many cooperatively owned businesses, but only worker cooperatives solve the labor problems, because only worker cooperatives are the ones that, actually the workers are democratically in control. So you take even Co-Opportunity Market in Santa Monica, it's a wonderful market and they do very good things, but the people that work there are not the members. It's the consumers that buy there that are the members of the cooperative. So you can have just as many labor problems with cooperative businesses if it's not a worker cooperative as any business.
That's very true. There's also the purchasing cooperative, which again is not a WSDE. And what is exactly a purchasing cooperative? How does that differ from a consumer?
Well, they're kind of the same thing.
Kind of the same thing.
It's a buying group. I was a member of something way back in the early 70s called the Free Venice Food Conspiracy. We met at a Methodist church, Ocean Park Methodist Church, and we were a buying club. We'd get together and combine our list of groceries for that week and then buy as a group, a buying group, and then redistribute it. So it's just a buying group. It's the same thing as a consumer cooperative.
And I've heard of, I have Israeli friends that have, one that even talked to me about actually living, as a child, living on a kibbutz.
Yes.
What is that exactly?
Well, it's a farming cooperative, but it's like the housing cooperative. But you also have one of my favorites, cooperative childcare is part of it.
Oh wow!
Yes, and
Wow.
cooperative education, cooperative schools.
It's been a
It's a
long-term
combined.
project. They've been around since the early 1900s.
Right.
Yeah.
They started.
It's one of the success stories.
Yeah.
And I
Cooperative
know,
living.
and here in Los Angeles, there's an artists community at what used to be the old Pabst Brewery downtown, the LA Brewery. Because I love going there for their art walks twice a year.
Oh yeah.
What kind of cooperative is that? Do
Yeah.
you know?
Well, again, it borders on being sort of a marketing cooperative,
It
right?
is, yeah.
Because you have independent producers bringing their what they produce on their own together to just for the gallery, just for showing it. And Native American communities do this also. In New Mexico, there's a number of where the tribes come together. They have a store. They bring all of their jewelry that they make and they market it together. It's a cooperative. Yeah, right by Albuquerque.
Yeah. I think I've heard of that actually. Because when I went through the Amtrak train there, I saw there were groups there selling jewelry together, and they obviously were different groups.
They have a beautiful store north of Albuquerque, and many of the pueblos bring their jewelry there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like turquoise stuff. Anyway, I could go on and on.
Forever.
But there's also the multi-stakeholder hybrid cooperative. Now that's a model basically where both members and the workers control the business. So there is an option for that to be a worker cooperative.
Well, you can have a worker cooperative. Let's say the store is, the people that work there are a worker cooperative, but then you also have the consumer aspect where the consumers become members of the consumer buying group, which are both, together. Now, we have so many different types of cooperatives because really this came out of the populist movement, the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s. So even credit unions came out of that.
Wow.
So this is a cooperative financial institution.
And we're definitely going to get more and more into that future episodes of the show. There's a couple of top experts in that subject, world experts that will probably be on this show as we go further on into the year. I'll just FYI.
I'd be curious, are there any, and you have the concept of producer cooperatives, and obviously we're talking about worker cooperatives here, are there companies that do a hybrid wherein you have worker cooperatives that bundle together, so to speak, in a producer cooperative to, I guess, create a larger.
That would be Mondragon.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Which we will
Thought
get to,
that's
which
what
we will
they
get to.
were.
And see, that's a
Yeah.
network of worker cooperatives, and they have all different types of worker cooperatives there. They have manufacturing, which is the fundamental basis, economic basis, but then they have a university, they have schools, they have social healthcare systems, they have banks.
Right.
All of these things are worker cooperatives and fall under the rubric of Mondragon, Mondragon Corporation.
So it's
The
a
BAS.
federation of cooperatives.
It's a
Right.
network, yeah.
Right, and we'll get into that in a little
Yeah.
more detail as we go forward in this. So, and then there is something I participate in when I worked in the corporate world. Okay, I had to do that. Employee Stock Option Program Cooperative, or ESOP.
Right.
So I know exactly what that is.
But not everybody.
I did not have as many shares as the CFO and the COOs and all that. So definitely not an advocate for greater equality of wealth and income. That is for sure.
Well, so now we get into the terminology. How does the term worker ownership differ
Right.
from the worker cooperative and other types of cooperatives? Worker ownership, you have a huge continuum of, very few shares. Somebody at Home Depot may have 5 shares,
Right.
but they do not participate in decision making. They have no further rights. There's
That's right.
still the management, all the labor problems, and a corporate ownership where the majority of the shares are owned by stock, shareholders who are investors who are not doing the work.
Yes, that's right.
It's not the same. Worker ownership, is a huge continuum. It can be one if you get to 100% worker ownership, then you've got a worker cooperative.
That's right. That's right.
But all other flavors are not.
And even if it was one person, one vote, how is it? How is one vote is not equal to obviously 1 million votes?
Right.
You know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So that's a big problem. So now when we go around the table here and be a little more specific, what is each person's involvement in education, advocacy, and proactiveness in creating cooperatives? Mm-hmm. So I'm also going to be part of that conversation. So before we get into the history, let's go around the table here, starting with George. Well, actually, let's start with Liz.
Okay, well, so I've been involved, like I said, with cooperatives most of my adult life. Worker cooperatives, somebody really kind of turned the light bulb on for me in the 80s, in the 90s, that they actually solve a problem for labor, for the workers, which is that it returns the means of production to the worker. And this is true economic independence and true ownership of the economy. So I became involved at that time, and now I'm the co-chair for the Union Co-op Council for the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, and and I work to create worker cooperatives here in Los Angeles, and I also did in Las Vegas when I lived there. The issue is that worker cooperatives have to see themselves as part of the larger labor movement. And so consequently, I'm trying to build bridges between the current unions and worker cooperatives.
Fantastic. Eric?
Well, I grew up in a very conservative family, and ended up.
We all have
Yes.
dark history.
ended up getting involved in a few different things that radicalized me and switched my direction, I guess you could say. And I got very interested in the cooperative movement right around 2006, maybe 2007, as a result of just learning a lot from actually Noam Chomsky, and I had a lot of friends who gave me I had discussion with, mostly online, who were a lot further left than I was at the time. I had started my leftward spiral, I guess you could say.
Upward spiral.
Upward spiral, there you go. And I at the time was a very big fan of small businesses, and I realized there's nothing. The logical conclusion of going in that direction was because the idea was, oh well, this is all about freedom, and I hate these large corporations, and the logical conclusion of that was, well, there's no more ethical business than a worker cooperative. I didn't know they existed at the time, and I had friends that raised my awareness of that, and it was like a light bulb switched on. So ever since then, it's been, lots of research done on the topic, and working towards hopefully someday becoming that. So I've been involved in athletics my entire life. I was a college football player. I was a shot putter. I also got into weightlifting. I competed at the national championship for weightlifting, and through that process, I got closer and closer to the point of becoming a teacher in various disciplines. And I, decided, hey, I'm going to go into fitness as a career. And I got brought into an organization. It was a CrossFit gym called CrossFit Survival. And the person that owned it, me and her clicked. And she was grooming me towards becoming her partner. And I was adamant about becoming a worker cooperative. And she fell out of love with CrossFit and fell into love with survival and decided to move out to North Carolina for that and left me with the business. And I brought on 2 partners so far who are trying to help me realize that vision, and I have a number of others that I'm grooming on a mentorship on the physical fitness side of things, and trying to plant the seed of worker ownership. So it's kind of my journey.
And you're also interested, you're also part of an international
Yes,
group?
that is correct. So we have what's called the Platform Co-op Investment Club. I have a associate that I actually met online through a lot of my radical left. I have a lot of the background of my education came through the what is perplexingly to most people called the libertarian left, with the anarchist bunch. And I studied a lot on Pierre-Joseph Proudhon is probably my biggest inspiration in terms of philosophically. And he started a school of thought called mutualism. And I met through a discussion group on that topic with a guy named Matthew Kropp, and he turned me on to a few different groups that he's involved with in terms of he's got a Vermont club, and I think there are a few other clubs out there right now that are small investment clubs. They're just like, a couple $100 investments into cooperatives. And a number of people that are involved are also involved in credit unions. And so we have, I think, 25 or so members right now.
So it's like investing in cooperatives.
Yes. So this particular one is
like being a member, or?
So no, it means that we're all members who pool together our capital to try to. We make democratic decisions. We run as a cooperative and we invest in cooperatives.
I see.
And
That's interesting.
the other ones are all local. This is the first of its kind that's international. And our goal is to. One of the things that got us involved with this thing was that there was a big initiative for buy Twitter and turn it into a cooperative. And
oh, really?
That was the big thing that we were like, oh well, let's try to shoot for that, and a number of others. And platform companies, if for those who are not aware, that's think like Uber, for example, and Airbnb. And so what we're looking at is making investments on globally impactful platform companies that would be run as worker cooperatives.
Interesting.
So,
thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And George.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, my background actually, interestingly enough, with the concept of co-ops actually started when I was very young. I'm second generation Greek American, and my father was, as he used to tell me, that democracy is a Greek word, which means people work together.
Yeah.
And I was raised in a small family business, which essentially was by nature a co-op.
Yeah.
So I grew up in that culture. And that, like we're sitting at this table, everything is decided at the table equally. Okay, so that has kind of carried me through my life. But when the 2008 crash happened, I was introduced to Professor Wolff's Democracy at Work movement. And ever since then, I've been trying to promote this through my classes, and then outside, I became the San Diego coordinator for Democracy at Work. And we met here in LA some time ago.
Yes, yes.
And
Actually, we met at the very first Democracy at Work
yes.
Los Angeles group meeting that took place at the Santa Monica Public Library.
Right.
So, yeah, and that's how this discussion began to create a worker cooperative.
Right, right. So we wanted to actually put it into practical action. And so ever since then, and by the way, I believe July is the anniversary of the movement now for this Democracy at Work.
Yeah,
and
I think you're right.
beginning last year, it's been spreading kind of like wildfire. Now it's actually going global. So it's addressing the institutional crisis of the capitalist system. It's
That's
not
right.
being able to provide for all. So democracy at work essentially means that. You're putting work in the hands of democracy. You're
That's
putting
right.
workers in front of the whole process of creating, essentially transforming the capitalist economy.
That's right.
Okay?
Because we have to go to the next system, which
Yes.
we're going to get into. That's one of the many topics we're going to get into going forward on this show. There's unlimited content, actually, the more we get into this. But this is a start today, you know. But basically, we are official as of June 1st. We have a cooperative, I would call it worker self-directed enterprise,
Yes, it's
which is called Arete Media Productions. And what we're focusing on is media production and education. So we're getting ready to expand, and obviously you're watching the Nowman show. This was the first already existing production for us to start working together on. So what you saw at the heading, the intro, was the first project that we completed together. And it was, and this has been everything. We'll get into more details of this later on, but it's been a total joy, a lot of work, and that's what we're going to get into in another segment about how, more specifically about that. But that's, and I'm also the original lead of the Pasadena group of Democracy at Work here in Pasadena. We just started, and we're having monthly meetings to educate one another and people in the community interested about this whole process. And our focus is really on, with Arete Media and myself personally, is not only to be a part of the community, which I am, and not only to be an advocate for education and an activist, which I've always been, but to always actually put this into practice and step by step talk to others about how to do that, and we're going to get into that as well.